Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss the vote in Parliament this week, which means that the UK will renege on a promise to come up with a system to reunite unaccompanied child refugees with their families in the UK. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and political commentary, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, before Boris Johnson's amended withdrawal bill, the situation was that the UK government would negotiate with the EU a system to help unaccompanied child refugees be reunited with their families. And you may think that this, like a lot of the amendments that Boris Johnson has put into the bill, because the situation was that the withdrawal bill that he came up with before the election, although it was worse even than Theresa May's bill, it still had a few safeguards in there because he thought he would need cross-party support for it. And since the election, he's added a load of things into it, like this, that are not even manifesto promises, but more of that in a moment, to make it much more extreme. And yeah, so you might be thinking, well, was this one of his election promises and therefore he's having to try and honour it? No, it wasn't. There was no mention of this policy, this amendment at all in campaigning, in the Conservative Party manifesto. And so there is no message from the electorate, no so-called mandate from the electorate telling the Conservative Party that their voters want the government to do this. As such, it can therefore only be seen as a spiteful act on the part of Boris Johnson, a deliberately cruel act indeed. It's almost like Boris Johnson is so desperate to emulate Donald Trump that he adopts his policies whether they do his own politics any good at all. After all, Trump tore families apart, treating children so cruelly that deaths have resulted. So Johnson goes as far as he feels he can, or at least he can get away with, to the same effect. And the fear for a policy of refusing to negotiate a system for reuniting the children of refugees in the UK is that these children who are fending for themselves will turn to criminal gangs running people smuggling. They'll turn to these people who will say, we will help you get you reunited with your families. But we know where that leads, and it doesn't lead to the arms of their families. It leads to slavery and enforced prostitution. And all because of an act of spite. And although the Conservative manifesto said nothing about reuniting, or not reuniting these families rather, it did mention refugees in one section where it promised a commitment to help genuine refugees. And it's important to note that that is what we're talking about. I know some xenophobes at this point will be thinking, as they do, they hide behind the notion of illegal economic migrants. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about refugees, and not people that I am calling refugees. People who are accepted as genuine refugees by the government. We're talking about children who are also refugees, of the refugees that have been accepted into the UK, being deliberately kept away from their families and pushed into the clutches of desperate criminals, dangerous criminals in fact. And morality aside, there is a dispassionate, practical point of view to this. This is an act that empowers criminal gangs, very dangerous criminal gangs. And there's me thinking that the only criminals that the Conservative government ever help are party donors. But it is also a moral issue, because sometimes you find, not just in this country, in countries in general, in history in general, you do find politicians acting in a way that is motivated very genuinely by a desire to protect their society. And I don't think this applies to Boris Johnson, by the way, but it has applied to others who do terrible things, but it is motivated by that sense of patriotism, somewhat misplaced. But a society needs to be civilised in order to be worthy of patriots, I think. And there comes a point where you look at a society and you look at what a society does, in terms of terrible things, and you say, that society doesn't deserve to continue. And this policy of cruelty is not at all in line with the genuine will of British society. We know this because whenever we see popular reports of the plight of refugees around the world, British people are always very generous in donating to these causes. And I think even those who somehow still believe that our immigration policy, which is one of the driving factors behind Brexit, had anything at all to do with the EU, these people even, or many of them, would not feel at all comfortable with the idea of children, many of whom are pre-teen, sleeping rough without access to toilet facilities, without access to water. And as I say, we're not talking about the children of migrants trying to cheat their way into the country illegally. We're talking about those with a lawful right to be in the UK because they have been persecuted in their own land and they are refugees. And that's, you know, and that's a lawful right granted by this cruelest of Conservative governments, because the government get to decide who is and who is not a refugee, ultimately, in this country. And that's what I still can't get over. You know, I'll say it again just to make it clear. What we're talking about is these are the children of people whom this Conservative government, the one with the tightest definition for this term, will accept as genuine refugees with a need for sanctuary. But apparently their children, some of whom are very, very young, are not to be granted the same protection that we are happy to grant their parents. And the government are trying to deny that they don't want to arrange a deal for them. Of course not, because the British people would not be comfortable with that. But the bottom line is that the bill contained a commitment to negotiate a deal with the EU to allow for the, you know, the reunification of these families. And that, you know, that commitment was in the bill, and it's now been removed and replaced with a clause that simply says that the government has to make a statement on it. Just a statement. Just one statement, in fact, at a particular point in time. And that statement can simply be, we haven't got time for this. Or it could be, well, we brought it up, but we don't think there's any way we can go forward with it. It can be the most vacuous statement, and they will have discharged their legal duty. There is no legal duty to even try to get a deal with the EU. So I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.